Shooting the shiznit, shooting the shiznit. Best little wrestling podcast in the business. Your host BT and all his guests. You'll never know who he'll have next. Shooting the shiznit, shooting the shiznit. Best little wrestling podcast in the business. Shooting the shiznit.
All right, we're live from 304 Studios in Jonesboro, Arkansas. This is an STSPod.club production. This is the 7th annual All Episodes Memphis in May. I'm BT, and right over there is the Reverend Ash Taylor. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, BT.
I'm excited because on Shooting the Shiznit, I bring people on here that I've known forever, or bring somebody I've hardly ever talked to. And you belong into the second category. We've talked a couple of times on Facebook Messenger, but I don't know. We might have met when I was down there. I don't know. I can't remember.
Maybe.
I don't know if you was there for the first award show. I've only been for the award show. That was the only show that I did.
No, actually, I think that would have been a few months before I started, I think.
All right. Well, I start out usually growing up did you grow up as a wrestling fan?
Absolutely. I started watching at 11 years old.
Oh, wow. And tell me about that. How'd you get started? Who was your favorites and stuff like that?
So my brother and my mom watched a lot of wrestling. And I was 8 years younger than my brother, so he fell off of it. And then fast forward a few years, I'm flipping channels on TV, and all of a sudden I come across a John Morrison match that's playing on Raw. I had no idea what was happening. All I knew was these guys were beating each other up, and I found it enjoyable. So I just kept on watching. And then I found out that it came on every week, so I started watching every week.
Did you then start trying to find out, like on the internet, you're like younger than me, so you had the internet there and just start looking up other promotions and what's going on. I told this story a bunch of times, but I think the big deal for us when I first started getting the kayfabe sheets, and we have the kayfabe sites now, but was the wrestlers' real names. I thought that was so cool to know all the real names.
It wasn't until probably a couple years in that I started doing that, because at the time I didn't have my own computer. My family just had the one computer in the house, so I didn't really use it to look anything up wrestling wise. I just watched what was on TV. So everything they told me was all I knew until we got a laptop that I could use.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you have the family computer, no one gets to look at what they really want to look at. So there you go. Who was your favorites growing up? Who did you start liking the best?
The first one that really hooked me was Jeff Hardy, because I started watching. It would have been 2007, February of 2007 was when I started watching, and that was right around that time that Jeff Hardy was really starting to get that big push. So I saw him a bunch. I saw him do all these crazy things. And as a kid, he might as well have been a superhero.
I think they were. They were like superheroes to us. So there was no Memphis promotion during that time, or was there? I'm trying to figure out whether you were able to watch any Memphis wrestling that was on Memphis TV.
Well, actually, I'm not from Memphis. I grew up in Chattanooga.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they have promotion up there during the time? They didn't, did they?
No, we had nothing on TV. We had little promotions here and there that ran in the National Guard armories and stuff like that, but we didn't have anything on TV.
There'll be some historian tell me I should have known who wrestled in Chattanooga, but I can't remember. I think it was the Fullers at one time. Robert and Ron Fuller did that.
It was the Fullers, and then the Freebirds came through there a bunch. Flair came through there a bunch.
Yeah, Flair always went into those little bitty places and lost. It was so funny. He would lose a tag team match or something, and that's how they would build everything. I have to ask this, and I'm getting real quick into it before I ask any other questions, but this gimmick that you're doing now, the Reverend Ash Taylor, and I told you we're not going to kayfabe anything, but, I'm not giving your real name out. Even though I did look it up and I do know it. There you go. Haha. uh, um, did you grow up in a church, a certain religion? Did you go to church every Sunday, or where did you get this from?
So I'm not religious at all. My parents didn't take me to church. Both of my parents are spiritual, but my dad didn't believe in churches. He believes that faith is an individual thing. You shouldn't have someone else tell you what to believe, is what he taught us. And then as I got older, I've just never really been very religious. I won't say that I'm atheist. I'm probably more agnostic than anything. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know, so I'm not going to act like I do.
Right, right. I think we all go through stages of what, like I said, I'm 57, so I've been through them all. I did grow up in a church, and that feel that you get in your character really, I know I reached out to you kind of like I don't know if I said mad scientist, but thinking more like a cult leader. Is that what you're trying to get? The righteous path. Where did you get the righteous path at?
So the righteous path came from my first few training promos. So Dustin Starr and I kind of came up with this gimmick together because in my first few promos that I did at training, I always had the air of superiority in the characters that I did promos for. And then he's the one who said one day, "What about a Reverend?" And I said,
wow.
"Okay." I admittedly, at first, I thought it was a joke because I walked into the Wrestle Center one day and he tells me that, and he was serious. So I went home and I thought about it, and I said, I can probably do that. No one else is doing that right now. And I cut my first promo, and the righteous path just came out because I wanted something to be non-denominational. I didn't want to bring up Jesus. I didn't want to bring up the Bible or anything like that. But I wanted something that sounded religious.
You notice that in cult leaders, they either or. They're either bringing Jesus into everything, or they're bringing themselves into everything. In that they center themselves toward the cult. So that's kind of like, there is the righteous path, but your role is the leader of these guys. And you went through a lot of people, by the way.
Yeah.
It seems like a guy comes in, and we won't even mention any names, or the people don't work for Memphis anymore, but they'll come in, they'll last a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden you'll be, where did they go? But I kind of like that because then it takes that mystique part of it that, hey, some of these guys, you never know what happened to them. What's Ash Taylor doing to these people that do no shows now?
They veered off the path. And when that happens, that's a mistake you only make once.
So a question I want to go back to, you're watching wrestling, you're a kid, you're into Jeff Hardy. I recently see Jeff at a con. I was going to say something to him, didn't have a chance, but man, they are still popular, the Hardy Boys. Huge line of people signing autographs. But when did you kind of know, that it was not on the up and up? I don't use the F word, but not on the up and up, and there was something going on, but you really didn't know what was going on.
I want to say probably about a year in, because now my parents, they from the get-go
said it wasn't real. They want you to know, huh?
But I was a kid and I was like, my parents don't know what they're talking about. Of course they're wrong. So it wasn't until about a year or so in that I was at school in the computer lab and we had free time. So I got on I Googled WWE and some stuff came up that wasn't WWE.com. And that kind of opened that door. And it wasn't until a year or more later that I really delved into, oh, hey, this isn't a combat sport. This is people working together to put on entertainment.
And did that bother you any? Because it didn't bother me. I just wanted to start finding out more and more about the business.
Oh, once I found out there was more to learn, I dived deep into everything I could find.
Did you ever trade? Was you above that? Did they have YouTube? So let's see. We did traded tapes. We did the kayfabe sheets. I just recently met a guy that I hadn't ever met, but because of wrestling, we've been friends since '91. So it's just it's the fandom of the wrestling business is a little different. I'm a Marvel fan, DC fan, every Star Wars. I'm into all the geek stuff, I guess, or nerd. I call it a nerd con. But the wrestling fandom is a little different. They want I just crazy sometimes. And when you talk about that, but did you feel like you just had to know everything then? You started looking at some other promotions and stuff like that?
Yeah, it was around that time that I discovered TNA. I discovered New Japan. I discovered all these different things because once I was able to start looking stuff up on the internet, I realized wrestling wasn't just WWE. Because when I'm watching TV at home, that's all I thought it was. There's WWE and that's it. But once I discovered everything else, I became a sponge. At one point, I was watching wrestling 5 to 6 nights a week because at one point in the States, it was on almost every single night.
It is now too.
Yeah.
I joke with my co-host Lance Levine, but I don't watch as much as he does. But I think I tell him 12 or 14 hours a week he can watch wrestling, and he usually watches it. Sometimes it's just on while he does other stuff, but there is something on every night. Maybe Sunday if there's a pay-per-view. Other than that, but you got something from A&E, aren't they doing Rivals or something like that on Sunday? So
I think so.
If you're a wrestling fan, you can stick in there and watch almost anything. So at what age, I don't know your age, but when did you decide, hey, I want to be part of the business?
I think it was almost immediately. I loved watching it, and I was like, man, I can do this. I mean, I was a kid at the time, so obviously I could do anything. But I wanted to do it. I wanted to feel like those superheroes that I saw. And then when I turned, I think it happened when I was 21 or 22. There was a place in Chattanooga that potentially had a school starting. So I looked into it. I said, oh, there are schools out there. There are places. You don't just walk into a building one day and you're a wrestler. You have to learn how to do this.
Some people do that.
Yeah, some people do. But for me, I wanted to make sure I did it right. So when I discovered that, I was going to train there, but then that school fell through. And it didn't happen again until, 2024? It happened in 2020, middle of the pandemic. I was living in Michigan, and a company called Pure Pro Wrestling up there had a school that was an hour and a half away from me. And I decided I was going to drive once a week and train. And that's where I got started before I moved to Memphis.
Wow. And tell me about this first day of training. What they have you guys do?
Oh, first day there, they had us locking up. They had us bumping, and they had us kind of moving around the ring. It was similar to my first day at Memphis training in that they wanted to put some of the stuff that you see in every match, and they also kind of wanted to see if you really wanted it.
Right. Yeah, I always say the motion of the hip toss is like so many moves. If you can take the hip toss, you can take a lot of moves if you can do that one. I never was that good at bumping, so I did about 18 matches and was smart enough to say, you suck in the ring, so I'm not going to wrestle. But there's always something, and that's the way I see. And I don't know. I haven't seen enough in the ring to wrestle, but the way I always think, there's always something for somebody to do, even though if you're the popcorn guy, to do in professional wrestling. And it seems like you kind of, even though the manager's not one of the most popular managers in the world is Paul Heyman right now, but other than that, I can't think anyone that's just as over or anything like it used to be when I was growing up. But is it something you want? Do you want to eventually become a wrestler, or is this kind of what you want to do?
I would like to wrestle more. I wrestle occasionally on like the Memphis house shows and stuff. The big reason I became a manager was about 6 months or so into training with Memphis. I ended up having a neck issue,
Oh wow.
and that sidelined me for 4 months. But I didn't want to stop, so that's when I realized I can talk, and I think I can get people not to like me. So put a microphone in my hand and let's see what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, I had reached out to Dustin. I think it was the first or second promo you did, and I was like, "Do y'all do this at the Wrestle Center?" Because you were talking just like it wasn't a problem with you putting a promo. And that's the way I felt when I decided to be a manager. You could put a microphone in my, which I've done podcasts for 7 years and I still can't talk, but you put a microphone in front of a crowd, and then I can get something over. But I love the idea of I've always liked the idea of the character of a cult character. I know that sounds weird, but and we'll ask a little bit more about if you have plans on how it's going to actually evolve. So let's get a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the character of Reverend Ash Taylor.